You heard the rest. Now here's the best. Stay Tuned Sports Podcast.
And hello there, all you Stay Tuners. Welcome back to Stay Tuned Sports. This is officially our last episode of 2019. And what better way for you guys to spend it with me, your good friend Jimbo. Actually, I probably should have said it the other way around, because it sounds like I'm kind of conceited or something like that. But no, first thing I want to say to you guys is thank you for helping us get bigger each year. This is going on 3 years now with Stay Tuned Sports. Next year is going to be so much better. We're going to have a lot more things to announce, probably within the first week or two of the year. But this is our MMA combat episode. Before we get started, head over to Twitter. Follow us there at STS Sports Podcast, as well as my personal one at Jimbo ST Sports. Like our Facebook page. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Subscribe to our iTunes, Spotify, Google, wherever you guys listen to. A couple fight announcements that have came out this past week. Just getting right into it because I'm really excited about this. Actually, this first fight I'm going to talk about. Uriah Hall versus Ronaldo Sueza. This sounds like it should be a good fight. Sueza is dropping back down to middleweight, obviously. He tried to switch it up and go up to light heavyweight. Lost by a close decision. But as far as this fight, you know, Uriah Hall is coming off of a two fight win streak going on here. Both guys are very talented. And supposedly it's only verbally agreed yet. UFC hasn't officially announced it yet, but this is verbally agreed for the April 18th card in Brooklyn. I can't see Sueza fighting much longer. I mean, he's 40 years old. He lost his last fight. I think he's actually on like a 2 or 3 fight lose streak going right now. But both guys heavy-handed and they're very talented. And Uriah Hall, who seems to have like this late resurgence in his career, I think if he could pull off a win here, you would have to think about putting his name back up there as a title contender, because he was close before he lost to Paulo Costa a few fights ago. Now, who do I think would win this one? I mean, I love Uriah Hall. I always had, even when he was with The Ultimate Fighter. And I really thought coming out of The Ultimate Fighter, like much of all of us, I thought he was going to be champion within the first 2 years. Just took a little bit longer for him to put everything together, and it seems like it's finally coming together. But Sueza's no pushover. I could see an upset here by Jakar, and does he go out riding into the sunset with a big win over Uriah Hall? And let's play with the notion that does happen. Where does Hall go from here? I mean, that's twice that he was real close to being a title contender and can't get over that hump. Now, he did change fight camps a couple of fights ago. But on the other side with Uriah Hall too, this is going to be in Brooklyn, and Uriah Hall is a New York native. So he's going to have that home field advantage going for him too. I just think Uriah Hall will pull this win out, and we may see Jakar retire after this fight, because he has talked about it here and there. Now, last weekend, there was a UFC fight night, even though it came on at 5 o'clock in the morning. I did not get up for it. I don't get up that early on Saturdays. I love my sleep. But when I did wake up, I jumped on Twitter and saw the highlights to the Frankie Edgar fight. I think, honestly, it is time, I think, he starts thinking about the R word, retirement. Because he just doesn't look like that Frankie Edgar. I know he's older. And Sung Jun isn't no pushover either. You know, we saw this with Uriah Faber a couple weeks ago with Peter Yan. Well, it didn't take Sung Jun long to dispatch him. 3 minutes, 18 seconds in the featherweight main event. And I watched it, and here's the other kicker about this thing too is Frankie Edgar already had a fight in place with Corey Sandhagen for the January 25th fight. Now, before this Sung Jun fight, they said if he came out fine, he'd still be on that card. I can't see a commission giving him a fighting license with his face all swollen up, cut up, like it was after the Sung Jun fight. I just hope, though, if the fight gets canceled, or if I'm Sandhagen, I'm telling UFC, listen, you're paying me either way. It's not my fault this kid, or this guy, Frankie Edgar, decided to take 2 fights a month apart. And on top of that, Frankie Edgar was trying to get down to Sandhagen's weight class. He was going to make his bantamweight debut. Well, I mean, if you're all swollen and your hands are messed up or whatever, you're not going to be able to train. You're not going to be able to keep doing your weight cuts. So I really think this fight with Sandhagen is not going to happen. And it's kind of a shame because Sandhagen was the one training this whole time, has to pay his coach, has to pay his training partners and all that. And now for the fight to be called off possibly because Edgar got steamrolled by Sung Jun. Now, I also did see Sung Jun came out and was a little disappointed in the rankings that he did not get bumped up to number 2. And Brian Ortega, who was his original opponent, is still number 2. How can you get... Now, Brian Ortega had to pull out because of a partial tear to his ACL. So, here's the Korean Zombie, who just ran through Frankie Edgar, who's a big name, called out for a title shot, and you're not going to put him as number 2 guy to be the number 1 contender. You still have Brian Ortega number 2. So what are you going to try to rebook Ortega and Korean Zombie? That's not fair. And this is what I talked a little bit about last week. These UFC rankings are stupid, and I'm glad the Korean Zombie also said that we have rankings for a reason, and it's not as a popularity contest. And that's all these are. I just don't understand why UFC have these rankings and they're not going to use it the right way. Just come out and say, hey, Brian Ortega is number 2 guy because he gives us more pay-per-view buys. Or he's more known in the US than over in Korea. It's just ridiculous how the UFC goes about their matchmaking. I understand you gotta make money, but you can't make money by... You don't think you'll make money by giving Korean Zombie a title shot? If you don't think he's going to pull in that much pay-per-views, you could still get 4 more fights on that card, like you did a couple weeks ago with Amanda Nunes, Max Holloway. That was a hell of a card. Just don't understand why these guys won't do it. But we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, being it is our last show of the year, and of actually the decade, I figured let's talk a little who's the female of the decade fighters and who's the men decade of the fighters. So we'll be right back after this quick break. Hey, what's up, everybody? This is your good friend Jimbo from Stay Tuned Sports. Are you looking to get into writing or putting out podcasts to give your hot takes or your opinion about certain subjects of the major sports or even e-gaming? Well, head over to bellyupsports.com and send the guys a message to get some information about how you could join our family. I've been part of the Belly Up Sports family since February, and I'll tell you what, it's a bunch of great guys and gals, help each other all out, and don't judge each other about what we put out there. So if you're interested, head over to bellyupsports.com, send a message to the guys. We're looking for writers, editors, even podcasters. So again, that is bellyupsports.com. Head over there, message them, and even read some of our articles. And welcome back to Stay Tuned Sports. It's your good friend Jimbo here. Head over to Twitter. Follow us there at ST Sports Podcast, as well as myself at Jimbo ST Sports. So before the break, I brought up that, since the end of the year and all that lovely stuff, how about we talk a little bit about who we all think the females of the decade, fighting-wise, and as well as the men, could possibly be. Starting with the women, first one you gotta bring up is Amanda Nunes. She's been so dominant that you have to put her in a class. For this decade, she has a 15-3 record. She has 7 UFC title fight wins, which is actually tied for most among female fighters. Has defeated every former women's bantamweight champion. And here's some of the names. Miesha Tate, which, in my opinion, helped Ronda Rousey and Holly Holm bring women fighting to UFC. Because let's remember, before the Ronda Rousey came from Strikeforce over to UFC, Dana White was completely against women fighting in the UFC. And I think it was a pretty good move that he did, because some of the fights are better and entertaining, more entertaining than some of the male fights. So, on top of Miesha Tate beating her, she defeated Ronda Rousey to retain her belt, which I believe that was Ronda Rousey's last fight in UFC. Then Amanda Nunes went on to defeat Valentina Shevchenko, which we see how nasty she is now. And then she basically beat the shit out of Chris Cyborg right out of the UFC. And Chris Cyborg, I believe, helped Gina Carano bring women to the MMA mainstream when they were with Strikeforce. And I'll get to Chris Cyborg and Ronda in a second here. But, you just have to. When we're always talking about pound for pound rankings, easily top 3. I would even say the best I mean, there you go. Just look at those names there. How many times she's defended this belt in both classes. You know, she's a double champ. For everybody that wants to say John Jones, listen, he is a very talented fighter, maybe the greatest that we've ever seen. And he has teased about going up to heavyweight next year. If he goes up to heavyweight next year and wins the belt decisively, then he does have the number one spot, pound for pound, on lock. Daniel Cormier, I would have said number one, but he did lose the belt to Stipe. Amanda Nunes hasn't lost her belt yet. She's defended it each time. And it doesn't even look like there's anybody out there that's close to even trying to dethrone her. So she's not my number one woman of the decade, but she's my number two, definitely. Then there's Ronda Rousey. You know, she's 12-2, and she is the one that helped bring women fighting, women MMA, to the UFC back at UFC 157, which she won, and then went on to win the women's belt and was pretty dominant for a while there. She actually had 12 wins by stoppage, which we all knew about her armbar, the infamous armbar. 11 first round finishes, and she was the first woman inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame. When it comes to women fighters of the decade in the UFC, I would have her as my number one. But she's actually my number three. Yes, she's the first one to ever bring in women MMA to UFC, but she did lose to Amanda Nunes, and that's why I have Nunes number two. My number one pick is actually Chris Cyborg. She helped bring not only women MMA to the mainstream in Strikeforce, she helped create a division in the UFC. Even though Amanda Nunes did beat her, she helped put women MMA on the planet, you know, in the mainstream. I mean, you have to think she's the number one person. And now she has a chance to go to Bellator and win a belt there, which she would have owned. Let's just say she wins the belt in Bellator. She would own the belt in Bellator. She owned the belts in Strikeforce, UFC, and Invicta. That's 4 belts in 4 major promotions. She actually had a 13-fight unbeaten streak throughout the whole decade until she fought Amanda Nunes earlier this year. 11 of her 13 victories in that span were by KO or TKO. So you have to think, you have to put her up there. And I'm curious to see who you guys think the number one female fighter of the decade really is. So maybe I will put a poll out and we'll revisit this conversation next week. I'll put those 3 names. Out of those 3 names, who do you guys think was the number one female fighter of the decade? As far as the men go, I mean, you have to put Conor up there. Minus all his antics, he had the same thing. He had the win streak going on. He was the first double champ. He was able to compete in a boxing match, and even though he lost, he went, 10 out of 12 rounds with supposedly one of the greatest boxers ever to live. I mean, pay-per-view buys, he's the biggest pay-per-view attraction for UFC. Now, I just talked about John Jones. You have to put him up there. As much as I bash him for all his extracurricular activities outside the octagon, he was the youngest UFC champion to ever win a belt. He's just dominated fighters. Other than the Matt Hamill fight, he'd be undefeated. He would be the Floyd Mayweather of UFC. And then I would actually put Daniel Cormier up there. You know, again, he was another double champ with the light heavyweight and the heavyweight. Especially at his age. You know, he's what, 40? I think he's going to be 41 next year. Now, out of those three, I would put Conor number 1. John Jones number 2. But Cormier number 3, but close. So maybe I'll do 2 polls this week and see what fighter for female of the decade and what male fighter of the decade you guys think would be it. So no pay-per-view cards till I believe like 2-3 weeks into January, so I can't give any fight picks. So it's a little bit of a shorter show than normal, but that will be it for us, or for me. I want to wish everybody a happy and safe New Year's. Please, if you're drinking, Uber at home. Don't try to drive home. And from the Stay Tuned Sports to all you guys, wish you a happy New Year's. Head over to Twitter. Follow the show at ST Sports Podcast, as well as myself at Jimbo ST Sports. Like our Facebook page. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's bigger things coming next year with the show, and hopefully you guys will continue to follow us through this wonderful adventure. Till next week, this is your good friend Jimbo, signing out.